Welcome to the Revision Wizards podcast. I'm Miss Catherine MH, and I'm joined by my potion-hating co-host, V.E. Griffith. I'm a proud overwriter.
This is episode 42, and we're talking today about overwriting and some tips and tricks for the editing phase. First off, Miss Catherine, what does overwriting mean?
Overwriting is literally that. You will take extra time to keep describing something you don't always need. Maybe you're adding chapters that aren't part of the book and don't really need to be there. But it is something that you do. You could go from having, well, what's the good example? Right, my own book. Um, for NaNoWriMo, when I originally started, it was 50,000 words is the goal to do. Scandal's pen was supposed to be 50,000 words. When, you got the book, VE, it was 200,000 words. The average sci-fi fantasy novel, 120?
Yeah, 80, 90, 120, something like that, depending exactly on the genre.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 200K is a lot to cut. Where does that come from? How do you find it? What's your process?
Sure. So, my first process was to look through and see what was really flowery. And when I say flowery, it means what kind of descriptions did I really not need and that I could cut? Maybe I've already described something once, so I can cut it later on or just use two words to describe it. Maybe I've talked about what the city looks like. Well, now you know, so all I have to do is write smoggy city street. Like now you can see that London feel of the smog coming around. I don't have to describe it anymore to you. You've already got it. There are some setbacks when doing that, and that's because of the genre I write in. Steampunk itself is a very flowery genre. They want descriptions of clothing, they want descriptions of mechanisms, they want descriptions of the whole setting, the social classes. So, in doing that, I had to make sure that, again, I wasn't repeating myself multiple times. If you're doing hard science, you're going to need those extra times to explain the science because that is part of the genre. So, when you're looking to cut stuff from overwriting, make sure that you're, still following what your genre needs you to do. So, flowery words. And then after that, I'll look into really did I follow what was supposed to be the plot? Because remember, I'm the wonderful pantser. So I will need to make sure that I actually, have a plot fully lined out. So once I know that yes, this plot has a beginning, a middle, and an end, I'm good with that. Now I'm going to look at all the subplots that I have put out in the book. Are they necessary? Do I need these many subplots? Which ones can I cut and the story still makes perfect sense? So I'll look into those. Maybe I've got a side character that I don't need and they had this whole section. I can cut that now because it's really not that important to the story. It was cool for me, doesn't need to be there. So those are a few things that you can look at when you're an overwriter. The flowery words and the extra side characters and those extra side plots that you may not actually need for the story.
Now, do you have a tool for finding those kinds of things, or is it just sort of you read through the manuscript and you hope for the best? I mean, do you go for the Post-it note method or index cards or giving it to your alpha reader, Ben, or what is your process for making that happen?
So that's a good question. I did come up with a template for myself when I started my editing process. Because my book is so large, I really needed to, understand things a lot better. And now I start this off much earlier. So this is part of my series Bible, and I call it my chapter index. And it will go into I want a one sentence summary of my chapter. I then have a sentence summary for the beginning, middle, and end of my chapter. So I can look through my entire manuscript and read my entire manuscript with my three sentences. In this template, I also have where is my plot moving? I have my subplot or any plot twists that are happening. And does this chapter have any foreshadowing? Those are really the big main ones that I'm like, hey, do I need this? I do go overboard. And of course, my indexes can be like 5 chapters or 5 pages long because, I'm an overwriter. But those are like the really important pieces to me when I'm looking at this is what is my whole chapter? Because I learned this one I had an English teacher in high school who would make us write a book report, but only base the book report strictly off of the sentences we did. So we'd have to read the book and hand into her a 1 sentence chapter summary of each chapter in the book. And then she would grade that because she would know what the book was. And she's like, did you read this? Are you just copying from other people? Like, what was the book? And then we could write our book report off of that. So I started using that to help summarize my book. So if I'm suddenly seeing like 6 chapters with Peter in it for no reason, I can cut those. Not that I don't love Peter, but I don't need Peter to make the book work. And that's the thing is that you're looking to make sure that the book works because you write that first draft for yourself. Maybe you would really enjoy those. Maybe you needed those 14 chapters in the beginning of the book in order to understand where the book was going to go because that's the only section you outlined. So you cut the outline section. That's what I look for.
That makes sense. Do you find yourself, as you go through, hanging on to stuff that's unnecessary, or are you pretty ruthless these days? Do you get better with time?
I get better with each editing draft. My first editing draft was really hard. The first original draft was 240 words, 1,000. That's 240,000 words. And I cut out about 30,000 on my first go through. And I was very heartbroken each time I was cutting out words. My second draft, that's when I started to go in and start cleaning up for like, hey, this plot did not make sense. This side plot didn't need to be here. And I could go in and cut those sections out. So the first time I went through it was really to try to get rid of those flowery sections. Then the second time was to really solidify my plot. And then after that, that's when I started getting like really vicious. I could go in and be like, I don't even need this whole 4 paragraphs and immediately cut all of them out. So I'm in the proofreading station right now. And I am still actually pretty ruthless. I am cutting full paragraphs still. We were just chatting, my alpha reader and I, Ben. We were going through and he was reading it out loud. He goes, huh, that it sounded I was like, we don't even fix it. Cut the whole thing. We don't need it. And he's like, sounds good. And we're just like cutting sections still. So I'm able to now be much more ruthless with my cutting. Originally, no. And that's why I think I have like 5 to 6 drafting phases because each drafting phase cuts out different sections for me.
Is being an overwriter and having to do all this cutting a problem that somebody should address? Is it just a thing that is? Is it is it something to practice on, do you think? Or is it just is it like, "Okay, this is my process and get over it"?
I know that a lot of cancers who I've talked to tend to be overwriters. And I think it's because we need to go through some of this stuff and get it out of our heads to make sure it's not needed, if that makes any sense. Like, as if you're outlining it, you can see, this is what my plot should be. This is what my side plots and how they tie into my story. Well, I don't know if Peter was really important. He is. But I didn't need 6 chapters of him. Like, he's a character who is important, and all I really need is 2 chapters with interaction with Theodore to show that he's an important character. So it's those little things of where can I take and, like, make it into the book without giving you 6 chapters that you don't need to read. So, for me, it's definitely my process. I have tried outlining in order to shorten. It has never worked for me, but it's definitely a thing that I would rather overwrite because the last time I tried to underwrite, I left my entire villain out of my book until the climax. Not that he wasn't there the whole time, but literally never wrote him onto the page because we were trying to make it as short as we could. It was still 200,000 words, but by the time we got to the climax, my alpha and I realized we didn't have the bad guy in the book. And we kept being like, there's something missing. But of course, I'm too close to it to have been like, oh, yeah, it's the villain. I left him out of the book. Like, there's definitely, I knew the chapters in my head, but I was trying to cut them. So I would rather be an overwriter and write it all in and have to go through and then remove sections. Because I think that's easier to do than add stuff in. Because I've tried to go back and add the villain. Nope. I had to scrap the whole book and start from scratch again.
That's a painful lesson at 200,000 words.
It is. It was also the second time I had to scrap that book. So, and I think at that point I was getting a little ruthless. I had already scrapped over 200,000 words, rewritten it, tried to shorten it, forgot my villain, and now I'm back to rewriting it. I think I've got like 40,000 words into it now.
As a chronic underwriter and an outli something of an outliner, I just can't imagine putting that much effort, especially as painful as writing is for me. I like to say, and it's an old quote that I don't remember where it came from anymore, that I hate writing, but I love having written. And, the writing is just very painful for me, and I can't imagine throwing away 200,000 words, period.
Yeah, it was not something I'd expected to do. It is good to still like I still have it and I can still pull chunks from it and insert it into the book that I'm writing now. It's just I have to be on that cautious side of here I can Frankenstein this in, but now I'm making sure that it lines up with this version.
Okay, so it wasn't a complete waste.
No, both weren't complete wastes, but I did have to, like, change quite a lot. The entire beginnings of each one are completely different. They get to the same point. It's getting them into space. That's where it becomes good. After the space part, it's all the same. It's getting them into space, which is about 100,000 words to get there, so
Holy cow. Okay, you don't want them to just strap a rocket to their butt and go. Okay,
it would be cool, but it would be hard to explain for teenagers how that happens.
target audience, all of that. Okay, what did we miss about overwriting?
So overwriting can also be kind of stressful because you're not sure if you've got everything you need on page because you're always going to sit there and wonder, oh, that section I cut, are people understanding it? If it's gone now, do they get it? And it's one of those things where it's like you don't want to treat your readers like they're stupid, but you're also not sure how stupid sometimes they are. And did you cut out a section that makes them and the book not make any sense anymore? So I have that worry still, especially with Scandal's Pen, because I just cut out the first 14 chapters of my book, and I have 4 sets of readers, 2 of which never got the first 14 chapters when they started from the new beginning, and 2 who had them to read through to be like, "No, I would have needed that information." So I'm they're almost finished, so, like, I'm biting my nails as I wait for my reply. It is one of those very stressful, "Oh my god, did I cut the wrong thing?" moments.
Okay. Well, I know that as a chronic underwriter, yeah, I left stuff out. That's kinda what I do. So so it's frustrating, and sometimes I wonder if it wouldn't be better if I were an overwriter because cutting is relatively easy for me, but creating is the hard. I guess it's just a difference in approach and temperament.
It also so I have ADHD and I will go into a hyper focus. So I enjoy writing the book. And my favorite section to write in the book, because I am a complete weirdo, is the middle. I love writing the middle. And I think it's because I do write huge cast member groups. So it's not like I'm working with like 5 characters. I'm working with like 40 characters, large cast groups that I like to weave. So I have a lot of room to weave like extra side plots, this twist, and like getting out of the middle and like having to write the climax is hard for me because I'm having so much fun. If I could keep making that middle go, I would, which is why I'm debating on doing a serial fiction because I can just keep going.
That sounds like fun. Um, unless you have any last comments, I think that about covers it for us.
I think so. Just pretty much, don't be afraid to cut and have somebody you trust who can read it over and make sure you're not missing anything big. Because you know everything in your head at this point once you've written it on paper. You have it all there, and it will be nerve wracking. Like it's going to be harder than they say kill your darlings. I thought cutting my book was harder than handing it off to an editor. Like, having you go through it was a piece of cake for me. Like, that was not the hard, scary part. It's literally cutting sections. That is terrifying.
I guess in some ways it's necessary to be terrified because it's a growth experience for us. So, alrighty. Well, then I guess that'll wrap it up for this week.
Alrighty. Stay magical.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode. You can find every episode on your favorite podcast player and on YouTube. For transcripts, please visit our website at revisionwizards.com. They go live the same day as our episodes.
If you'd like to reach out to us separately, you can find me at vegriffith.com and Miss Catherine at scribes-pen.com.
Stay magical.